All right, so this is my conversation with Ambassador Gentry Smith. Ambassador Smith held a variety of posts within diplomatic security, including postings in Cairo, Tokyo, and Rangoon. He was a former director of the Office of Foreign Missions from 2014 to 2017. He was also a special agent within diplomatic security and a police officer way back in the day. Most importantly, Ambassador Smith graduated from North Carolina State University, which is something that him and I have in common, our education at NC State. So, without further ado, here's our conversation together. I do want to start off, Ambassador Smith, with a little bit about your days at NC State, and this is one thing you and I have in common. This podcast is recorded at NC State, and we also have a very, I guess we're keen on bringing back some of those voices, the NC State voices, back to our campus, and engage with them in different capacities here at the radio station. And perhaps before we even start in highlighting the career path that you've chosen that recently culminated in becoming the Assistant Secretary of Diplomatic Security, I figured we could perhaps talk a little bit about your days at NC State in terms of moments that you probably would never forget, and perhaps things that, about this school that make you, I guess, proud of being part of the alumni network of NC State.
Yeah, well, as I've spoken on other occasions when I'm talking about my experiences with the university, I give a lot of credit to the university by stating that had I not had the background that I feel that I was provided during my time at the university, uh, my professional experiences would have probably been very different. I felt that the university prepared me very well for pretty much everything that I've encountered since then. I came to university, as I'm sure many do, with more of a STEM interest. I came to major in engineering and graduated in political science. And that in itself is its own journey. And I'm glad that I did discover, the world of political science during my time of study at NC State. But it's kind of interesting that I feel that the early technical studies that I was involved in, pursuing engineering, uh, married up very well with definitely the liberal arts and political science background that in the field in which I graduated. I'm one of the fortunate ones that I feel comfortable in both working in both areas and just having discussions and engaging with individuals with who have varying backgrounds. I like what's being done right now, particularly at the College of Humanities and Social Sciences, where there is an understanding that even if you are there and engaged in STEM, the capability to communicate and to express ideas and the blending of the two is going to be something that's going to be very relevant, I feel, moving ahead, particularly given the current environment.
Mm. Master Smith, given my sort of connection to the field of political science, because I'm an international studies major, I
Hmm.
take I actually appreciate the fact that there is this emphasis on the idea that a student in that program is typically expected to learn a different language. And given your experience abroad, which we will explore a fair bit later in our conversation together, I'm sure
Hmm.
you would have come to realize that learning another language is quite important, especially if your field of if your career is pushing you toward traveling or being exposed to different cultures. And so I wonder if during your time at the university, if you ever felt the desire to learn another language, or if you actually did learn a different language, and how that journey was like for you, or you experience, how did it manifest post graduation?
Hmm. Yeah, I feel that if you have international interests well, even broader than that, the world in which we're living in now is it's a global world, and and you're going to benefit from having that exposure, that experience to multiple cultures. Definitely, if you have an interest in doing the things that I have done, that is of great benefit to you. During my time at NC State, yes, I did study Spanish.
Mm,
I think it was probably one of three languages I think that was probably popular during that time, with Spanish, French, and German being pretty much the major three languages at that time.
yeah.
Um, I know that that is much broader now, and just in some of my conversations with persons involved in the language schools of language, there, I very much support having that exposure, learning a different language and learning about multiple cultures, because it just makes you again a more rounded individual, well-rounded individual, and one who's much more prepared, I think, to engage with individuals whose experiences may be very different from you, and having the capability to communicate uh, is of course always a given. It's a plus. I've had the benefit during my career of also learning additional languages, and so I picked up didn't pick up I studied Arabic for during my times of being stationed slash posted in the world, and I attempted to learn Japanese and even Burmese during my times
Wow.
in Asia. So I think that yes, I'm a strong proponent of learning the languages and having that exposure, even if you don't achieve great proficiency in them.
I admire that, Ambassador Smith. I really do. I truly, I certainly see the value of learning another language. And if, if I had the opportunity during my time here, I mean, I came in with, another language under my belt, but if I really had
Mhm.
more time, I would have certainly learned a different language here whilst at NC State. Um, and I think, especially people who are interested in, I guess, in field diplomacy or even serving their country and being deployed abroad in different capacities. I think, like you said, it's rather important. And that sort of brings me to, I guess, another question that I would love to maybe explore with you here. You've engaged in serving your country in different ways. I think after graduating from NC State, you became a police officer, and
Correct.
yeah, and then there was a transition where you worked with the diplomatic security as a special agent. And
Mhm.
I'm wondering here about this transition that you have went through post graduation, and then the other transition from being a police officer to a special agent. How would you
Mhm.
describe these, different, I guess, potentially career paths? I don't know if they would be that different, but maybe you can uh, maybe tell us a little bit more about that.
Yeah, I from my time there, I had a strong interest in national security and international affairs issues, uh, and honestly, coming out of NC State, the Raleigh Police Department was hiring at that time, and after many years of study and a family, I figured I better get into something that was going to pay some money. And the city of Raleigh was actually paying very well for its police officers.
Wow.
And and given my political science background, I could see at least some correlation there. And I had also had a couple of courses in criminal law during my time there. So I applied with the police department. And actually, after being hired on and doing it for a few years, actually uh, began to enjoy the work. Yeah, having an opportunity in law enforcement, number one, being a Black American, I had the chance to represent within my community and let members of my community see someone who looked like them and someone who could interact with them. And as stated, from a even from a cultural situation, having understanding and having a much more easy interaction than others. And so began to build on that and work within the community at the same time serving that community. But along the way, understood where my great interest, where that was, and uh, and so I never lost that interest in what was happening in the world.
Mm.
And so after a few years on the department, I ran into a friend of mine who was actually working at the State Department. And he told me about a new organization that was being formed at that time at the State Department, the Diplomatic Security Service, which was an outgrowth of the Beirut bombings in the
Mm.
early 80s from our embassy in Beirut and in a couple of other, well, in a few other locations around the world where our diplomats and our diplomatic facilities were being targeted, along with, targets on U.S. foreign policy presence. And so, as a result of that, the State Department created the Diplomatic Security Service, and where it was in the process of building the organization at that time and hiring individuals whom they thought had the professional backgrounds to serve in that capacity. When my friend told me about the job, he actually said, "Hey, I've got just the thing for you," because he knew of my interests, he knew of my background, and actually, the two blended perfectly. This was an opportunity to have a law enforcement experience, and at the same time broaden that on a global scale. And so it was a marriage meant to be. I applied for the position and to join the organization, and it was one of the few that was selected to to begin this career.
Gosh, that's a very interesting sort of career, a little bit of a career shift. Maybe not but I mean, it requires a little bit of travel, so I would consider it a huge. Um, I'm wondering here if you had any expectations, Ambassador Smith, about I guess the reality that you're going to be thrust into. I reckon maybe there has been some sort of training, right? That you have to maybe meet certain standards. There's a
Hmm.
criteria, and I'm sure one's, training can be intense, but maybe there's a certain level of reality checks that you had to endure even post the training. You're like, okay, this is interesting. So what was that like? The sort of preparation process.
Well, I will say that coming in with a law enforcement background gave me a leg up
Mm.
uh, for the type of work that they were that the department was looking for. Um, and also, I think coming at the time that it was at its inception was also something good to experience.
Mm.
Uh, I'm very clear to persons who are interested in doing this that we want you to come as you are, and we will mold you and shape you into being the type of individual who can be successful at what we do.
Yeah.
And that's proven true. We will recruit from a diverse back, cadre of individuals. We while probably 50% of the persons who would have interest in this will either come with a law enforcement or military background, that still leaves 50% from everywhere.
Yeah.
Yeah. Retail, teachers, lots of persons who've been involved with NGOs before, and persons who have zero exposure or experience to that, maybe from the arts, but
Wow.
have traveled abroad or have an interest in, and as I stated, being involved and experiencing various cultures. Uh, so yeah, we say come as you are, and that was true for me as well. Come and you will be shaped into being um, a good special agent with the Diplomatic Security Service. The training we in the initial training is the same for anyone that's involved in federal law enforcement with the U.S. government. We go to one of the federal law enforcement training centers. For us, it was Glencoe, Georgia,
Mm.
and you go down there for the basic special agent training course that all persons involved in federal law enforcement go through. At the completion of that, then the Diplomatic Security Service had its own separate training to to give you exposure to what the State Department is. What is it that persons within the Foreign Service, what do they do? What will be your role as a special agent with the Diplomatic Security Service, protecting its personnel, protecting its facilities, protecting national security information, being very comfortable liaising with law enforcement from other countries as you're assigned abroad,
Mm.
and ensuring that you can interact with them, both on law enforcement investigative matters, but also on managing the security program, which you will have responsibility for at the embassy or consulate that you're assigned to, for protecting U.S. citizens who visit there, the U.S. employees and local employees who will work at that embassy or consulate, and then your special relationship with U.S. businesses, educational institutions, NGOs that operate within that country that but maybe will have a nexus to the United States, and you know that you're going to be the principal point of contact for that entity. You're also working with
Wow.
a lot of other federal agencies and institutions that are have a representation at that embassy or at that consulate. And so learning what they're about to and learning what your role, how your role is interrelated with what is going on there that is within their area of responsibility, and where there may be overlap because of some of the things that you both have an interest in making sure that they move ahead positively.
Hmm. That's a very, I guess, extensive phase of training, because they're trying to prepare you for the real world, and that can be quite intense. Um,
Yeah, that's true. And I think that it's done, in sections.
mm,
First when you're first coming on, you don't, there's getting the basic skills that you will need to be successful doing that, and then as you progress professionally, you return for additional training to help to build on those skills. And so I think that the gradations of training as you move along professionally are well laid out, and so you
mhm,
don't have to take it all in at the very beginning, but you take in quite a bit at the beginning,
yeah.
because it's I think it's important to know what you will be doing, and you will need to make that decision rather early on in your career
Mm,
if this is something that you want to take a full bite of that apple, or uh, just get introduced to it, but understand that your time would be better spent somewhere else.
yeah. Let me ask you this, Ambassador Smith. Have you had travel experience before embarking on your journey as a. No?
No, it's I love being asked that question. I had never been on a plane
Oh my goodness.
until I was hired with the U.S. Department of State. My
Gosh.
first flight was actually flying from Raleigh up to Washington, D.C. to start my training.
Oh my goodness. That must have been a
Yeah.
very intimate, special moment.
Yeah, because it's funny. Since that time, I'm rarely off of one. But yeah, I knew that I wanted to see the world. I was very comfortable knowing that I would have to operate in different environments, and that was something that had always been a point of curiosity with me.
Mm.
So when offered the opportunity, it was something I jumped at, and I got that opportunity very early on in my career, shortly after completing training.
Gosh. So, uh, to sort of understand that fully, there was no travel experience, but maybe there has been interactions with foreigners before, or or not really.
Well, well, yeah. I did then at NC State. Of course, you're in a multicultural environment,
Yeah.
and I had that exposure to many students on campus who were from other countries, and actually had built quick friendships with some of them
Mm.
anyway, and one of the other things was, during my first 2 years there, I was also an Air Force ROTC.
Right.
So I had that expectation of traveling abroad anyway.
Mm.
And so that was one of the pieces or points of interest with me. Uh,
Yeah. Well, Ambassador Smith, I'd be interested to know about the first, I guess, flight outside of the United States because, I mean, I remember my first flight ever was when I was, a little young, a little kid going to Turkey with my family, but it was certainly different than my first flight abroad on my own to Lebanon because that was when I was 17 and I was studying abroad, living on my own. But that was just an entirely different ball game because it's just no support system. You got to find your own people. You got to do this and that, and just. But so it's a special, different sort of ball game. And I'd be interested to hear about your experience, like the first ever travel experience abroad as a special agent. What was that like?
yeah. So I completed my training in December of well, I guess it was actually like January, maybe late January, early February of 84.
Mm,
Uh, and and I was assigned to the Washington field office as a special agent, doing honestly background investigations and VIP protection. And having a police background, I was bored very quickly with the work that I was assigned to. And
wow.
so by that April, actually, they some asked for 4 volunteers to go to Cairo, Egypt,
Mm,
to do a temporary assignment at the embassy in Cairo. Because the security environment there had increased, there had been an attack on actually on on members of diplomatic security personnel who were serving there at that time.
oh,
So they wanted to augment coverage in the office, and at the same time upgrade the coverage on the U.S. ambassador on his security details. So they asked for volunteers to go over for the temporary assignment, and I think before they finished asking, my hand was up, and
you were
yeah,
that
and
eager to go.
so, oh yes, get me out of here. Give someone else these background investigations. But anyway, yeah. So off I went that April for my, as you say, my first international trip into Cairo
Wow.
at a time when the situation there was pretty dicey, actually.
Mm,
Uh, and That was my exposure to working with members of the Egyptian law enforcement who were also assigned for security at the embassy there, and working with the security apparatus that was in place at the embassy in Cairo, and then also been exposed to the Marine security guards and other individuals who at the embassy had a role in counterterrorism or law enforcement matters. So getting on the plane, landing in Cairo to where I step off the plane, and there are security personnel at the airport with semi-automatic machine guns
Whoa.
and just a different level of exposure that I no one had experienced at that time, and it was like, yeah, you're not in Kansas or in Raleigh anymore. Quickly, son.
Yeah.
So, yeah, you get out of the airport, hop into an armored, bulletproof Suburban,
Mm.
go to the embassy, get your issued all of your security equipment that will be with you for the remainder of the time that you're on your mission there
Whoa.
to meet with the varying personnel and professionals who this is their life and learning all of that very quickly on the job. And at the same time, understand that you're a diplomat and you're operating in a foreign country, but you have a very specific mission that will require the skills that you've been trained on, plus some excellent interpersonal skills in order to be successful at what you do. So from a period of April until August, that was my assignment every day, along with my other three colleagues whom I traveled with, and also working with the security detail of Egyptian law enforcement, who also had that responsibility, and the uh, local investigators and security personnel that were hired directly by the security office at the embassy. So again, an entire security program in which you become incorporated into, and you learn very quickly uh, a phenomenal experience for me.
Mm.
And of course, an eye-opening experience, exposure to the world that I was going to be working in from that point moving forward, and something that it registered with me, it resonated with me, and I must have done a pretty good job because at the end of the assignment in August, the ambassador asked me whether or not I would like to stay on
Oh
and
my.
do a full 2-year tour
Wow.
working in the security office there. And I was like, yeah, where do I sign? Well, first of all, I need to go back. I need to grab my family and having this conversation.
Oh my
And
goodness.
he was all about, yeah, if you want it, I'll give you a letter, and you can take this to your assistant secretary, and we'll just take it from there. And
Gosh.
that was the beginning of my overseas career,
Oh my goodness.
and I've never looked back since.
That's just incredible. I mean, I'm sure your family was also pretty, beyond dismayed by that, big news.
Well, it's kind of interesting. My wife, who was also an NC State graduate, and I think at that time we had two very young kids.
Hmm.
Yeah, neither one was. I think the oldest may have been six, so they may have been like 6 and 4
Okay.
at that time. And it's kind of like, hey, we're gonna go and live in another country. It's gonna be Egypt, and you're like, okay, let's do it. Hey, kids, we're off to Egypt,
Oh my goodness.
and yeah, yeah. So it all worked out.
Wow. What would you say the one of the most I'm sure there are so many things that stand out about your time in Egypt. But what would you say was something cultural that maybe you weren't perhaps prepared for before you went there? Or did you have maybe things already sort of figured out? What's what to do, what not to do, sort of thing.
Um, I I did not expect the openness, the ease of operating in a foreign environment. that we actually experienced,
Mm.
honestly. Um, we have been told several things. One, if you move into an Arab culture and you move there with kids, you know, Arab culture loves baby. They love young kids. And so here was this young couple coming with these brand new kids, and and although we lived on a housing compound owned by the embassy, it was right in the community.
Mm.
And so the day that my wife went out of the house with those two babies, and they were like just absorbed on the street, oh, look at the babies. And it
Oh
was
my
like
goodness.
she was never home again for like 2 years. So the warmth and welcoming of the community was something I don't think that we were prepared for, but
Mm.
actually was turned out to be a very positive experience. Which I mean, considering what I was there for
Yeah.
and the threat level that we all were operating under,
Mm.
could have been a very different experience. It could have been one of those experiences where, you just go there, we're going to lock ourselves in the house for 2 years, we're not going to engage, we just got to be here. I've got this really important job to do, and let's just get through it. And we pretty much took the opposite approach. Yes, I still had all of those requirements. The work was quite demanding,
Mm.
but I was working with such a professional group of individuals, to where my work life and my home life could actually be different.
Mm.
And so I credit that to probably that's one of the things that kept us there. That's one of the reasons that we stayed, and that I stayed in this profession, was that we saw that was duplicated in other areas in which we served in around the world.
Yeah.
Now, of course, during that time frame was also the first Gulf War.
Ooh.
That was Desert Shield, that was Desert Storm, that
Wow.
was Norman Swartkoff coming into country several times. Egypt was a strong partner in that, and several congressional delegations with both Republicans, Democrats, congressmen, and senators, and other law, military DoD professionals who had a steady stream of movement in and out of Egypt as things progressed
Mm.
during that time. So the level of interaction that was required, definitely the level of work on my part, was unending.
Wow.
Uh, but it was a very positive experience as well.
Yeah, this is very interesting, I guess, timeline or time period in which you were operating, because I would imagine
Hmm.
also, at the time, people, um, the dissemination of information was probably not, unlike today, right? I mean, back then it would have
Hmm.
been, very few outlets where you can get your information from, very few places, where perhaps, yeah.
It's, it's pretty interesting that you bring that up, Abdullah,
Hmm.
because that was probably CNN's introduction to the Middle East.
Ooh.
Yeah, Ted Turner came over during that time, and met with the Egyptian government in order, I think, to be able to give the CNN feed, into Egypt.
Interesting.
There was early on commercials about CNN with Hosni Mubarak saying all the time I was listening to the CNN, uh, and yeah, so we were there for for the genesis of that.
Mm.
And you're right, that was probably the principal news source uh, during that time.
Wow.
So again, with the beginning of definitely of Desert Storm, you got to see it, well, not real time, but pretty close.
Mm.
As soon as footage was being released from DoD, it was being played on TV over there,
Wow.
and uh, and yeah, so yeah, we were definitely tuned into CNN. And you're right, it was the ushering in of definitely a new age for information during that time.
Oh my goodness. Yeah, that's a reality that I could only dream of, you know, and now we have social media and all these things. It's very,
Hmm.
like, access to the information is just very instant, I reckon. More instant than perhaps how it was. But
Yeah,
yeah.
no, there was no email at that point. And reporting wise, yeah, our reporting was done through cables and through phone calls, secure phone calls back to the department.
Mm. And how, and since we're talking about communication here, what was your, I don't know if that's something we can talk about, but the main method of communication that you use throughout your time there in Egypt? How did you guys exchange signals or exchange information? What would you guys use on a daily basis?
What daily? We got our messages back to the State Department via cable.
Mm,
That was the telegraph cable was the major reporting form for the government abroad, and we yeah, and then of course telephone would be the
yeah.
uh, second way, but for a detailed report on your activities and what was done, it was via cable.
Mm, yeah. And was there ever a sort of level of maybe worry by your family given the climate that you're operating in? I mean, it was a very intense climate. Yeah.
Oh man, my mother. When I took the job,
Yeah.
when my mom first, first of all, I was a police officer. She's like, "Oh my God, what are you doing?" And then I was like, "Oh no, I'm going to go into something a lot safe. I'm going to work for for the government. I'm going to be a diplomatic security special agent." And then, like right before I get to go to Cairo, was the attack on, I said, on a couple of diplomatic security officers who were posted in Cairo, which is, of course, on the evening news. And she said, "Hey, isn't this the group that you're going to work?"
Oh my god.
I was like, "Yeah, Mom, but see, with that expert training that they had, they all survived." And she was like, "Yeah, okay." And then we go to Egypt
Gosh.
with her, I think, grabbing at our ankles all the way to when we were boarding the plane.
Oh
And
yeah.
so we would call as frequently as possible. We would send mail as frequently as possible to just let them know, hey, here's some more photos. We're still alive. We're having a ball here. And never telling, the horror stories.
Oh my
And
goodness.
yeah, and only giving good news. But yeah, of course there was concern. Fortunately, we got to come home for a visit after the first year.
Mm.
And the kids who were having a ball and were excited about being in the new school that they were in, and that was all of their talk. So uh, she rested a little better, saying that the kids were having a good time.
That's very
She
good.
was, and of course, we brought like really nice gifts,
Nice.
but she was never thoroughly convinced. So yeah,
So,
it was a very thin line there.
gosh. So was it a relief for her and your family, broadly speaking, to actually transition from maybe being in the field to managing things from the State Department? Was that, did that create a level of relief or not really?
Um, we as a family, I think we really enjoyed our time abroad,
Mm.
living and experiencing and having that exposure to different cultures. Uh, So from Cairo, we came back to the States. We were in the States for 5 years. I had two assignments back, domestic, and then we went back overseas to Burma,
Mm.
and we were over there for 3 year period. And then from Burma, we went back to Cairo
Wow.
for a uh, uh, 4 year term at that time, and another Gulf War. Uh,
goodness.
And but both and by this time we had three kids with us. But the two older boys who had started their school in Cairo actually graduated from high school there
Mm.
and went off to college. And then we went from there to Tokyo with my daughter, who graduated in Tokyo. And after Tokyo, the department had found me and said, "Yeah, you're coming home." And I was like, "No, no, no. I think my time is better spent abroad. I'm pretty good at this." And they're like, "Well, we only have one assignment for you, and that's Baghdad." And I was like, "Okay, where is it in DC exactly that you want me to serve?" And, and so, yeah. So, and by the time I had been promoted to the senior foreign service,
Okay.
and yeah, uh, coming back to Washington, which I never got another assignment abroad after that.
Oh no.
Uh, and I guess the timing was appropriate as well, and because I had moved into this positions of senior leadership,
Mm.
there was plenty going on back here that you needed persons who had lots of experience, and then of course the credentials to back it up for interaction back here in the department and with other U.S. government agencies who also had responsibilities abroad. So we became that core group for, I guess, providing guidance and direction and formulating policy for activities as it related to foreign affairs,
Mm.
and specifically for me as it related to securing our personnel and our facilities and our information during a time when there were new and increasing challenges.
Yeah. I mean, I would imagine that you would get perhaps too consumed in that work that you might not even miss the sort of exposure to another assignment. Or were there bursts every now and again? You would think, oh, I mean, maybe if I were to
Well,
go, you know.
fortunately, because of the responsibilities that I had,
Yeah.
it still required me to get on a plane every now and again
Okay.
to go out and either interface with, again, with our host country personnel in the countries in which we had operations going on, or to interface with personnel who were working at the embassies and consulates at those locations for specific projects that we had underway.
Hmm. Yeah, so there was still perhaps a fair bit of travel and a level of maybe
Mm-hmm.
exposure where you can feel, some of that, I guess earlier sensations of travel abroad.
True, true.
Yeah.
And for much shorter periods of time, and honestly, probably being able to get quite a bit more accomplished as well.
Mm.
I was probably on the road about every other month.
Oh, wow.
So maybe about 5 to 6 times per year, I
Mm.
was taking a trip abroad or returning to a location. During that time, I came back in 2007, so Iraq was very active during that time, and we were opening up a massive 104-acre embassy compound there.
Wow.
That was something that had been built during wartime, and in a way that we had never been done before.
Mm.
And to do that successfully, and to know that it was a secure facility on the day that the ribbon was cut, was something that required tremendous attention. But I feel we were very successful doing that. And at the same time, our relation with the new Iraqi leadership that was coming to power, uh, there was just a lot of support that was necessary uh, during that time as well. There were things, and our relationship on the government side, the U.S. the Department of State, DoD relationship had morphed in a way and been open and exposed in a way that had never been done with that amount of intensity or so broadly before, and also with the intelligence community.
Mm.
Because it was very much one team, one fight. So there was just a lot of amalgamation that was required and collaboration that was required, and it did require persons with the exposure/experience that could maneuver through that successfully. And then right on the heels of that was Afghanistan, and
Right.
yeah, so there's going to be your next decade of work, between those just those two locations right there.
Yeah. When you look back, Ambassador Smith, at some of the work that you've done, where would you say you may have made a mistake and you sort of learned a lot from that, maybe perhaps mistake or failure? Like, was there a story that you can share with us, before we sort of get closure to our conversation?
I would say one of the things that I learned, one of the lessons that I learned, and the way in which I learned it was probably the gentlest way that it could be learned,
Mm,
and that is understanding that you never, and I've heard others on your podcast speak this, you never have full information.
mm,
And so a lot of times, the more sources, the more collaboration you can do to get better information is helpful. Because when you think you know it all and you don't, that's a mistake that could cost lives. And yeah, and we had one situation during my second tour in Cairo where actually it was a vehicular accident,
yeah. Mm,
and we had persons who were pretty severely injured during the accident, and there were resources that were actually near the accident site but did not belong to me,
yeah.
belong to other entities within the embassy and some from the host government. And from protecting information, protecting personnel, I narrowed the resources that were utilized for that, and uh, and it was time sensitive. Fortunately, the people survived,
Hmm.
uh, but had I taken full use of all the resources that were there for me and the knowledge from others instead of stovepiping, um, the result it would have we would have saved time, and the outcome that that was successful in the end would have been done more quickly and with a lot less pain
Yeah.
than others had to endure. And from that, I my great takeaway was when you do have people and they're sincere about being helpful and they have resources that will be to your benefit, it's best to take advantage of those.
Mm. Well, Master Smith, I really appreciate your time and the conversation we had. I truly enjoyed this, and I look forward to perhaps meeting with you sometime again in person, whether it be here or in DC or somewhere else, perhaps abroad. But thank you for
Oh
your time.
no, it's been a pleasure, Abdullah. Thank you very much for having me on. This is an awesome podcast, and I'm happy to be a part of it. And of course, go Pack.